Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Wednesday, July 9th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 567 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we've got some more New York Jets news and notes to discuss, as Breece Hall and Mason Taylor recently made some comments on the big changes coming to the New York Jets offense in 2025. I wanted to break down those changes and why it's a good thing for this Jets offense. We'll dive into that today on the podcast. Before we begin, though, want to talk about the Jets training camp dates here just very quickly. As earlier today, the New York Jets released their open practice dates to the public. Tickets will be on sale tomorrow for the regular public at 2 p.m. Eastern, July 10th, of course. Season ticket holders, of course, get early access pre-sale at 11 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. But the open practices of the public will be July 25th, July 26th, July 31st, and August 2nd. And in the second round of open practices will be August 7th, August 12th, which will be a Giants joint practice, of course. Jets will have two of those, one at Florham Park, the other up at the Giants training facility across from MetLife. August 19th and August 20th will round out the training camp schedule there to the open public. So 8 total practices, tickets on sale tomorrow for the first session. Cannot wait to get out to One Jets Drive. Training camp's always a lot of fun. Some of the most fun I have every single year covering this team. You know, summertime still. Get to see what this team looks like. First look, first glance in person of what this team looks like under Aaron Glenn, this new coaching staff, and overall new regime. So cannot wait. So those are the practices that were released and officially announced earlier today. All right, so let's get into today's topics. Breece Hall and Mason Taylor both recently spoke about some of the changes coming to the New York Jets offense here in 2025. I wanted to start with Breece Hall, and then we'll get to Mason Taylor's comments a little bit later on as we talk about some of what the New York Jets are going to do this year in terms of the tight end position. But here is Breece talking about a change and what he expects to see a lot of in this New York Jets offense in 2025.
Now, for you, what is it like having a new quarterback in Justin Fields handing you the ball off?
It's going to be fun. You know, we're doing a lot of, read options, RPOs, which sometimes it sucks, but sometimes it works really well. So it's been good to get to know him and hang out with him. Getting a really great relationship with him outside of football so far. So, all we're going to do is just keep getting closer and keep challenging each other to get better.
A lot of read options and a lot of RPOs. I've talked about this a lot here on the podcast as two things that I think the New York Jets are going to do a lot of this year, that being the read option, that being the RPOs. And the reason I think that is going to be such a big focal point and a talking point and something that is going to be used a lot of is because of the new quarterback you have in Justin Fields and the mobility that he brings to the table. I've mentioned many times the Jets offense, right? You look at Tanner Engstrand, his background coming over from Detroit. This is going to be a team that's going to have a run-first identity, win the battle in the trenches, an offensive line that should be very, very good this year if things play out the way they do and some of the performances we have last year come back again this year in the interior, your two young tackles. We talked about the offensive line the other day. and using all of these guys in the running back room, mirroring that Lions image of the Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery 1-2 punch with the Jets. You hope it's Breece Hall. You hope it's Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis potentially playing a big role as well, maybe a bigger role than some expect this season behind Breece Hall in that running back room. So we've talked about that a lot. But the read options and RPOs is another big factor. And I've said a lot that this is an offense that not only is going to take of what Detroit does, and I continue to emphasize this of they're not going to be the level, most likely the level of Detroit, right? But they're going to mirror those similar schematic-wise, those similar, that running back room, all of those different things. And you look at the read options and the RPOs, and the reason the team I've always brought up is mirroring similar to what the Baltimore Ravens do. And I think that's something that the New York Jets obviously will hear. Breece Hall just said it, but should use a lot as well because it's been such a huge success when you look at what Baltimore's been able to do. And I always say, just like I did with Detroit, it's not going to be the level of the Baltimore Ravens, where the New York Jets this year are going to be the number one rushing offense in football. Justin Fields isn't Lamar Jackson, and Breece Hall isn't Derrick Henry. But the way that Lamar and Derrick Henry produced last year and the way they had success on the read options and RPOs, even prior to just last year, that's been a bread and butter of Lamar Jackson's career so far, is something you should expect to see more of and need to see more of out of this New York Jets offense with Breece Hall and Justin Fields, where you have a mobile quarterback, one of the better rushing quarterbacks in the NFL. Say what you want about Justin Fields' arm, passing, decision-making, pocket, all that stuff. From a passing perspective, there's questions. That's why he's on his third team in entering year number 5 of his NFL career. But the mobility and the rushing perspective, that can't be denied. When you look at Justin Fields, and I brought up some of the numbers here just to prove and bring up how the Jets here can really play to their strengths. Fields since 2021, since entering the league, has played 50 games, 418 carries, 2,509 yards, 6 yards per carry, 19 touchdowns, and an average of 50.2 rush yards per game. When you look at Lamar since 2021, really has been the only quarterback better at rushing than Justin Fields. You kind of look at the trio of Fields, Hurts, and Lamar as your top 3 in the NFL. Fields is right there from a rushing perspective. Lamar, 57 games played, 532 carries, 3,267 yards, 6.1 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns, 57.3 yards per game. Over that span, first in the NFL. Justin Fields, over that span since 2021, 7 less games, is only the quarterback only behind Lamar at that 50.2 yards per game number. So the point you bring up here is this is a Jets team that's, of course, going completely shifting from where they were last year, right? Aaron Rodgers last season had 624 dropbacks. That was a franchise record. Ridiculous amount of passing. Breece Hall didn't have a game last year where he had over 20 carries, right? Non-factor. And I expect Breece Hall to have a big year. I think Breece Hall, can he have a similar year to a Jahmyr Gibbs type of season from both a rushing and receiving perspective? I think it's possible. Can he be your Jahmyr Gibbs in this offense? And then can your Fields and Breece duo, that tandem, play the role of what you see in Baltimore from the read options, heavy dose of read options, heavy dose of RPOs? And I've said this so many times. The Jets' run concepts, run schemes have just been so vanilla, so boring, so predictable, right? Where teams know when they're running. I joke about this all the time. You could have a Jet fan 10 beers deep watching the game and be predicting what the Jets are going to do because their run concepts were so vanilla. They were so obvious. And obviously, defensive coordinators, players on the defense side of the football are going to know that as well. Adding Fields with Breece not only benefits both of them, because from Breece's perspective, Fields is able to take some of the attention off of him, where on those read options, he has that ability to take it himself or give it to Breece. That keeps the defense, should keep the defense on their heels, keep the defense guessing a little bit more. And in the RPOs, from Fields' perspective, it gives him an opportunity to not only potentially pass, but also run, where he can use the strength of his game in this offense, which is his legs, of course, his mobility. And that's also going to keep the defense guessing. Not something that this Jets team has been able to do a lot of the last couple years, because they just haven't had really the mobility at quarterback. That's an interesting thing that Fields has. And to Tanner Engstrand's point as well, Jared Goff was more of your prototypical pocket passer, right? And Engstrand already has talked about it, how he's been able to adjust and will adjust to Fields from a presence of, you want to make him a better pocket passer. That's what he needs to do. He does need to improve there, but also being able to utilize his legs to your ability. Engstrand and that Detroit team, you didn't have that ability. Now you have a quarterback with wheels where you can implement more of those RPOs, implement more of these read options, where you have a running back that I still believe in a ton in Breece Hall, that if used properly is a threat, and a quarterback who has been one of the top 3, top 2 rushing quarterbacks in the NFL, and that can't be disputed. The numbers back it up. You watch him play, it's obvious. He put up 1,100 yards just 2 years ago from a rushing perspective with Chicago. And I think this is another interesting, too, because I talk about, right, Breece Hall benefiting from Justin Fields, but I also think Justin Fields is somebody who can benefit from Breece Hall in terms of having a legit number 1 running back alongside him in the backfield. Because you look at his time in Chicago, the rushing numbers behind him were not pretty. In 2021, the Bears' leading rusher had 849 yards from a running back perspective. 2022, 801 yards. Fields that year actually led the team with 1,143 yards. And in his final year in Chicago, Fields had 657 rushing yards, which led the team. The leading running back was Khalil Herbert with 611. So the point I bring up here, Fields never had in Chicago a 1,000-yard rusher. Breece Hall arguably is the best running back that he's played with, that he will play with up to this point. So not only does Fields take some of the attention off of Breece, but Breece also helps out Fields in this offense as well, giving him a legitimate number 1 running back, something that he really hasn't had, specifically during his 3 years as the full-time starter in Chicago, not counting just the 6 games he played in Pittsburgh last year. I think that's something else to note. And you look at what the Ravens were able to do. I mean, this has been one of the top rushing teams in the NFL. It's read options, RPOs. If you're successful at it, it is a dangerous, dangerous combo. And if Breece Hall has the year that he needs to have, where he's coming off of a rough season, coming off of a year where you kind of question what his future is with the team, the consensus is down on Breece Hall. If he goes out and has a big year, this is an offense that can easily go from 32nd in the NFL in carries, 31st in yards per game, and tied for 31st in touchdowns, to a well above average offense that sees a quarterback with some of the best legs in football and a running back in Breece Hall who, if used right and put in the right system, not just as a rusher, but as a receiver as well, have a good year. This is a team that could take a massive step forward, using both what you've seen out of Baltimore that I've mentioned many times, the Ravens blueprint, and also taking that Lions blueprint where Engstrand's coming from, which saw them finish 3rd in carries last year, 6th in yards per game, and tied for 2nd in touchdowns. And you talk about the Breece and Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, whatever running back combo. You look at what Gibbs and Montgomery did last year. Engstrand's familiar with that 1-2 punch in the backfield. Those two had 2,187 yards and 28 touchdowns. Gibbs himself finished 5th in yards and tied for 1st in touchdowns last year, on top of the 517 and 52 receptions he had from a receiving perspective. So this all falls along the lines of this run first, run heavy approach that the New York Jets are going to take. And I think you look at the two offenses, Engstrand and the Lions, and you look at what Baltimore's do. Those are two things that I think you should expect to see a lot of. You should expect to see a lot of what Detroit does implemented here, and also a lot of what you saw or see in Baltimore in terms of the RPOs and read options, because there's not another team in the NFL that uses that as well as the Ravens do. And I continue to say this. I'm not saying the Jets are going to be the Ravens. No. But the style, schematically, the concepts, similar, should be similar with those read options, RPOs. Breece taking it sometimes. Fields taking it. Fields having the choice, passing it, running it, utilizing his legs. Can he take a leap as a passer? We'll see. Only time will tell. But I just think it's important, too, playing to these guys' strengths, right? That's something else that I think is important. Playing the Fields' strengths, which is utilizing his legs, letting him utilize his legs, get in a rhythm, and then you can open up the pass. Breece's strengths, right, not just being a runner, but also from a receiving perspective. And having somebody alongside him that's also a threat in the backfield, I think is beneficial as well. So that was Breece Hall on one of the changes in the New York Jets offense. The first big change that we'll see. The next change here is from Mason Taylor. Here's what he had to say on Tanner Engstrand and the use of the tight ends entering the 2025 season.
What have you thought of the way that Tanner Engstrand's offense has been operating and his plan for tight ends specifically?
Yeah, I know. We love it. All of our tight ends love it. We all have aspects and kind of different ways we come and impact the game. So I think Tanner does a great job of putting us in positions to be successful, and that's the biggest thing. But, you could tell by the way we install stuff and we go out there in the practice field, the tight ends definitely are going to be used.
That last part, most important, right? Tight ends definitely going to be used. That's a breath of fresh air, and that needs to happen coming into the 2025 season. And similar to what we just got done talking about, Justin Fields, Breece Hall, and the heavy dose of RPOs and read options, this is another offense in Tanner Engstrand, your offensive coordinator in Tanner Engstrand, coming from a team in Detroit where you've had Sam Laporta, and they are all too familiar with utilizing the tight ends. And just in general, no matter who the offensive coordinator is, the fact that the New York Jets, what the New York Jets have done with the tight end position over the last decade, and I'll get to some numbers here in a second, is unacceptable. And it needs to change. And it needs to become more consistent. Way more consistent than what this position has been utilized for the Jets, really over this playoff drought when you look at it. But you look at Mason Taylor, just the Mason Taylor side of things here. I've mentioned it a lot. I think you look at the way this New York Jets offense is going to be utilized. The weapons are going to be utilized specifically in the passing game. I think you look at Garrett Wilson, of course, leading the way. Breece Hall being your number 2. This is in terms of receptions, yards, and all that, targets, all that stuff, right? Garrett will lead the way. I think Breece is number 2. Mason Taylor, I think, is probably number 3. And then your wide receiver 2 is probably going to be your 4th most targeted receiver. That's how it's been in Detroit the last couple years. That outline between Gibbs, Laporta, number 1 receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then essentially their second receiver has been their 4th, right, most targeted pass catcher. And that's what I think the role of Josh Reynolds is going to be, who seems to be emerging as wide receiver 2. That was his role in Detroit. But when you look at Mason Taylor, just what to expect, I mean, he should be used a lot more. He should be. And I think you should expect him to be used a lot more, not just from the Tanner Engstrand perspective, but also from Justin Fields. And I've read these numbers before, but I want to throw them out here again because I think this is important. Justin Fields, throughout his 4-year NFL career so far, is very, very familiar with using tight ends and is actually used the tight ends some of the most out of any quarterback in the NFL. Here are some numbers. In 958 pass attempts from 2021 to 2023, Fields targeted tight ends on 24% of his passes, which ranked fourth most in the NFL. When you look at the 2023 season alone, Fields completed 75.9% of his passes when targeting tight ends, which was 13th out of 49 quarterbacks that year with at least 100 passing attempts. Another note I'll throw out there that I think is important, Fields produced a 112.3 passer rating when targeting tight ends in 2023, which ranks 7th in the NFL. Something Fields has done well. We mentioned it just in the beginning there with Breece Hall. Passing hasn't been his strength. That needs to improve. But something from a passing perspective that he has done well, and there's a lot that needs to be cleaned up, but what has been one of his strengths is his ability to not only just target tight ends at a high rate, but have success with them, right? 75.9% of his passes, or completed 75.9% of his passes when targeting tight ends, which was 13th out of 49 qualified quarterbacks in 2023. And in that 112.3 passer rating, which was 7th in the NFL during 2023. So not only does he target tight ends, but he's also had success targeting tight ends. And you look at Mason Taylor, I'm not going to sit here and say that Mason Taylor is going to go out there this year and have 800 yards and implement himself as a top 5 tight end in the end. No, that's crazy for year number 1. But I think Mason Taylor can go out there consistently and be a 600 as the years go on. I think he can potentially get to that 800 mark. But I think you're even looking in the range of consistently, because that was one of his biggest factors at LSU that made him so good, was just the consistency and the reliability that he brought to the table. This guy, I think year in and year out, can be a 600 to an 800-yard player. Definitely in an offense that's going to have a focal point on the tight ends, and especially entering a year like this where you have a quarterback that likes to use the tight ends. You look at Mason Taylor's numbers in college. We've brought him up a lot. You know, he's first in LSU's program history in both receptions and yards. I always think this is an important number. In 38 career games, 37 of them, he caught a pass. And I think that's important because this is a guy that he's very reliable. He's got very good hands. That's one of his biggest strengths. Good hands. He's smart, high IQ. He's going to find the pockets in a defense. He's going to be your legitimate safety blanket tight end, right? And when you look at what to expect from Mason Taylor this season, especially with the way they're going to use him, I provide a couple examples here of what to kind of expect from him in terms of yards wise. I think he is capable this year of being somewhere around that 500, 600 yard mark, maybe, 550 to 650, maybe gets to 650, who knows? Down the road, 700 plus, certainly a possibility. But you look at just some numbers here, just some players that I want to throw out there that similar production to what I think Mason Taylor can do this year. Dustin Keller in his rookie season. I'll throw a former Jet out here. Really the last high-end tight end the Jets had. I know Conklin had a couple nice seasons here, but last year really took a drop-off. Keller, 16 games played in his rookie year, 48 receptions, 78 targets, 535 yards, 3 touchdowns. His receptions ranked third on the 2018. He was third in targets and third in yards. The reason why I think that is such a close example is, number one, 535 yards. That's, I think, a range for Mason Taylor. But number two, he was your third most targeted, third most reception, and third most yards. He was your third highest pass catcher. Mason Taylor, I think, is going to slot in as probably that number 3 when all is said and done here. Behind Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, I would expect. Another one, Pat Freiermuth's rookie year in 2021. 60 receptions, 79 targets, 497 yards, 7 touchdowns in 16 games played. He was third on the team in receptions, 4th in targets, and 3rd in yards. Again, in that number 3 range. Very similar to where Mason Taylor probably could be. I think the yards a little bit low. receptions, maybe a bit higher, actually. I think you're looking at Taylor maybe around that number of receptions. I think yards could be a bit higher. I think he'll get over 500. Frymouth was under 497. Now, he did play one less game. If he played all 17 that year, he definitely probably gets over 500. But the bottom line is, right, he was third. That's kind of the target share that you would expect from Mason Taylor. And Cole Kmet, I threw him on here as well. This, to me, would be an excellent rookie year for Mason Taylor if this is what he does with Justin Fields. Now, Cole Kmet, this wasn't his first year, but this was his first year with Justin Fields in 2021 when Fields, of course, was a rookie. He played 17 games, 60 receptions, 93 targets, 612 yards. Second on the team in receptions, targets, and yards. But if Taylor can go out there this year and have 60 for 600 plus, that would be huge. Now, Cole Kmet did not score a touchdown that year, so you would hope, right, Taylor has a couple more than that. But again, I think anywhere in that 500 to 600 range is realistic for year number one. And moving forward, I think you look at Taylor potentially being north of 600, 700, somewhere around that, where he can really take a step. But I just think it's so important. I think it's just such a big deal for the Jets that they're actually finally focusing and making it a focal point to have the tight ends be a threat and be a factor in this offense. How many years have we sat down and watched Jets teams just completely ignore the tight end? Not even have. Sometimes not even have an NFL caliber tight end on the roster, right? How many times? And I did some digging because I sometimes can get kind of nerdy like this. So I did some digging on over this playoff drought. So I go back to Dustin Keller, 2011 Dustin Keller season where he had over 800 yards, best year of his career. The last great season from a Jet tight end, right? And since that point, I ranked every leading tight end where they ranked in the league that point, just to show how much of a non-factor Jets tight ends have been and to back up the importance of Mason Taylor in this offense and Tanner Engstrand's plan to implement the tight ends a lot in this offense. So here it is. So 2024, Tyler Conklin had 449 yards, was 27th. Tyler Conklin, 2023, did have 621, solid year, 13, so top half of the league. And he was also top half of the league in 2022 at 12. Conklin's average was 17th. Last year clearly took a big drop and was never properly used, I've always said, in the red zone. So that was the last 3 years. Moving on after that, though, really gets ugly. Ryan Griffin in 2021, 261 yards, was 35th. Chris Herndon, 287 in 2020, 36th. Ryan Griffin, 320 yards in 2019, 32nd. 2018, when Chris Herndon fooled us all. You remember the Darnold down the stretch, that Packers game, they took him to overtime. Darnold, Chris Herndon, that duo fooled us all in 2018. Herndon that year had 502 yards, which actually ranked 18th. And we thought he was going to take off. That, of course, never happened. 2017, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, 357 yards, 28th. 2016, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, 110 receiving yards, 66th. 2015, the best Jets passing offense that I've ever witnessed. The one-year wonder in Fitzmagic, right? Jeff Cumberland, 77 yards. That team, of course, was led by Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker. That was that receiving tandem. Cumberland was not much of a factor. Tied for 71st in the NFL among tight ends in yards. 2014, Jason Morrow had 345 yards. That's 28th. 2013, Jeff Cumberland, 398 yards, 28th. And in 2012, Jeff Cumberland as well, 359, which was 31st. That is ugly. Since outside of the, 2 of the 3 years with Conklin, the Jets, through that list of Griffin, Herndon, all those names, 1 year of over 500 yards, that was Chris Herndon in 2018. Other than that, 200s, 100s, below 100 yards. Completely pathetic. I mean, not even just non-factors. So I averaged that out. So since the 2012 up in here now 2014, so a good chunk of this playoff drought, the average ranking for a Jets tight end in yards is 32nd in the NFL. That's terrible. That is unacceptable. And what I hope and you project potentially Mason Taylor to do, if they use him properly, and there's a plan in place here to use him properly, at least under Tanner Engstrand so far, is you look at Dustin Keller from 2008 to 2011, because 2012 he only appeared in what I think was 8 games. All right. 2008 to 2011, this is where he finished. He was 11th his rookie year among tight ends in yards, 17th in yards in 2009, then 9th in yards in 2010, and it was 6th in yards in 2011. His average ranking was 10th. So the Jets went from a tight end in Dustin Keller, who finished average through those 4 years as the 10th best tight end in the NFL, right, to 2012 up until 2024, average ranking of 32nd. That is awful. And you hope that Mason Taylor can be that productive year in and year out, top 12 tight end, maybe sneaks into the top 10, right, with a couple big seasons, but be that consistent, significantly above average, right, top 12, top 13, inside the top 11, right, squeak inside the top 10 type of tight end. And you need a coaching staff that's willing to utilize him. Engstrand has a background there coming from Detroit, and there's a clear plan in place, and there's a level of finally hoping that this team understands the importance of the tight end. You look at all the best teams in football, they've all got really good tight ends. I've mentioned that many times. So hopefully Mason Taylor here this season could be the start of some consistently good tight end play for the Jets, especially out of a young player here. You know, a day 2 pick. Would love that to be the case. And we'll see how it all plays out. So figured I wanted to break that down as well. So talking a lot of the offensive side of the football today. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. A little bit of a longer episode here, but wanted to really dive into some of these changes on offense and what they mean for this New York Jets team. What are your thoughts on Breece Hall and Mason Taylor's comments? Your thoughts on these changes on offense? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and any other Jets takes you got. Let me know down below. Appreciate the support as always. We'll talk to you soon. Until next time, JETS. Jets, Jets, Jets.